Welcome to episode 10 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're new to the show, we would really appreciate it if you subscribed, because it would really help us out as we continue to make some great Leafs and NHL content. So, it was not a good week for the Toronto Maple Leafs. As of Monday, March 15th, 2021, the Toronto Maple Leafs dropped to 8th in the NHL in points percentage after going 1-3 this past week. It was their worst week of the season so far. Some Leaf fans are panicking, but others are still relaxed. And we are going to go over the week that was and give you our thoughts and opinions on everything that went down with this team. But first, it's time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How are you doing, man?
You know, Bruno, a lot of our episodes kind of start in a similar way. You do your thing, you do your intro, you ask me how I'm doing, and it's pretty much been the same answer every time. I'm doing good, Bruno. Things are good, Bruno. Well, you know what, Bruno? Things are not good. You want to know why? Because my favorite hockey team sucks. That's why. Things have changed, and we have a lot to get to in this show. I have a lot of problems in a lot of different areas. So, as you can tell, things are going to be very exciteful on this week's edition of Gluttons For Punishment.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing better than fired up Michael Lepore. And I think that's what we're in for on this podcast. This is going to be great. But yeah, guys, I mean, it was brutal this past week. And listen, I'm usually pretty optimistic about this team. And for the most part, I'm still very optimistic in terms of what I think this team can accomplish, you know, from now until the end of the season and come playoff time as well. But last week was a big time wake up call. So let's just kind of go over the week that was real quick. So the Leafs started the week on Tuesday at home to the Winnipeg Jets. And honestly, the Leafs played pretty well. But Connor Hellebuyck was unbelievable. He made 36 saves. The Leafs had 25 high danger scoring chances in this game, but the Jets pulled off a 4-3 win. So you kind of just throw your hands up in the air. You give credit to Connor Hellebuyck. He was able to win that game for the Jets. But if you thought Connor Hellebuyck was good in the Tuesday night game, he was even better on Thursday night. The dude was unbelievable. He was standing on his head, making some of the best saves, honestly, I think I've ever seen. I mean, it was getting ridiculous at one point. I started laughing at some of the saves he was making, stopping dudes on breakaways, stopping guys point blank in front of the net. And then he was getting the help with a crossbar on that amazing chance from William Nylander.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It was unbelievable. But after everything that Connor Hellebuyck did, that superhuman performance, Auston Matthews came to the rescue of the Toronto Maple Leafs like we've seen him do time and time again, scoring that ridiculous backhand goal in overtime, his 21st of the season, giving the Leafs a 4-3 win in overtime. But then on Saturday night, things got worse for the Toronto Maple Leafs as the Jets beat them 5-2. Things did not get off to a good start because Pierre Engvall scored that goal and it was called back on the hand pass. And then the Jets just kind of took over the game. They scored 3 goals in the third period, 2 on the power play. There was a couple of questionable penalties in that third period, but Freddie Andersen just wasn't good. And honestly, Freddie Andersen right now is in a stretch of some pretty bad hockey. He's allowed 18 goals in his last 5 games for an .872 save percentage. So he has obviously not been very good. And we'll get into all that later in the podcast. And then just when you thought the Leafs had a cupcake game, that they were going to turn things around and everything was going to be sunshine and rainbows again, playing the terrible Ottawa Senators on the second night of a back-to-back, it was anything but. The Leafs were asleep. They did not show up. It was a complete disaster from beginning to end as the Senators beat them 4-3. So the Leafs go 1-3 this past week. Lepore, they are now 1-5 since sweeping the Edmonton Oilers. I
Yep.
need to hear your thoughts, man. What's going on with this team?
A lot's going on with this team, and I think we can go through game by game and see different reasons why they lost, minus the one game they won. It was a mixed bag, really weird mixed bag of a week, and everyone, I was half kidding with my introduction. I'm not as panicked and flabbergasted with this losing streak as I may have made it sound. Because let's move back and look at those first three games they lost, the two against the Canucks and the one against Winnipeg. That first game, Demko stood on his head, made 31 saves, save percentage of .969. The second one, 37 saves, save percentage of .949. That first game against Hellebuyck, the Leafs lose again, 36 saves, save percentage of .923. Over those first three losses, the Leafs fired 104 shots on net, scored 6 goals. The goalies they faced had a .942 save percentage.
That's insane.
Like, that's insane. Let's face it, stuff like that, I don't even want to say that happens because it shouldn't happen, but that's the stretch where you look at it and you say, it's just not fucking going their way and the puck's not going in. And you mentioned how Hellebuyck was playing. It actually got ridiculous, like how well he was playing in that game. And even like on the Leafs end, like I am going to shit on them a little bit because there has to be some blame placed on the players with regard to ability to finish. Like there's the saying in soccer when a player misses the wide open net, like, oh, it would have been easier to score, meaning he had such a chance it'd be difficult to miss that one. The Leafs had a few of those, like that one with Nylander where Hellebuyck came across, he saved it, and then Nylander put it off the crossbar. Like that was actually comical. Like Nylander could try that one 1,000 times and not do it again. Like absolutely crazy. You mentioned the game after that, they win. And that game, again, they played incredible. They played absolutely incredible. If I remember correctly, I looked at Money Puck and the Geeks had the Leafs at that game at like an 88% chance to win. And it's never that high. Like hockey is a sport where even if you're like 60, 65%, you dominated your opponent. But then you go to the next two games, and we've said a few times on this show that the Leafs maybe played their worst game of the season. A lot of people were saying metrically that first loss to the Jets was their worst game of the season. Like I mentioned that Money Puck stat in their favor for their win against the Jets. That loss, I think the Leafs were at like 25%. Like
yeah,
bad.
Just actually add a stat from James Myrtle, Lepore. He said that Winnipeg led Toronto 14-3 in high danger scoring chances at even strength, and the Leafs had 35% expected goals in that 5-2 loss on Saturday night.
That's terrible. I think especially like for a team that prides themselves on like creating scoring chances and puck possession, like they look bad. But at the same time, like I'll fire it back to you, and I'm sure a lot of people want to hear us talk about it. Those two penalties that were called. There was the first one on Riley where the puck's in the air and the Jets player, who was it again? Was it Ehlers?
It was Ehlers who just ran into him.
Skated into him, and they call it. And then, of course, the Jets score. And then there was that one with Hyman I thought was even more ridiculous. Like, at least with the Riley one, I'm like, okay, I guess he kind of saw this. But the Hyman one was just like craziness. Like, I was replaying it again and again, trying to pinpoint what exactly the referee saw. And then, of course, Keefe loses his mind like he should, and you get a 5-on-3, and they're gonna score because, you know, hashtag hockey gods. But no excuses. Again, the Leafs played like absolute trash. And then the Sens game. Was there ever? Like, I'm gonna try my best not to laugh at this. Was there ever a game that just had more of those weird hockey things pointing to one team winning and one team losing? Like, the Leafs played the night before, like whatever, that happens. But what was weird, and I'll ask you this, I don't know if you saw it, they flew the day of the game. And I've spoken to hockey people in the past, and I thought that wasn't allowed. I thought it was kind of like an NHL rule that you had to travel the day before. Like maybe they've made a change this year. They're making exceptions based on the circumstances with COVID. And again, you're only playing teams in your division. So maybe it was something they're allowing now. But have you ever heard anything like that before, that you're not allowed to do that, or they are allowed to do that?
I haven't heard that you weren't allowed to do it in the past. I'm actually not sure. Maybe they did change the rule this year because of COVID and the divisional play that's happening across the league. But it could have also been a daylight savings thing because the clocks went forward. I don't know. Maybe the Leafs thought it was more beneficial to leave the day of And because
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they had the choice. So
yeah, exactly. And I think I saw a quote from one of the players saying that there was kind of it was kind of 50-50 between the players in terms of like half the group wanted to leave the night before and half wanted to leave the day of. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I saw that floating around Twitter as well.
Okay.
And they were only flying to Ottawa, right? So it's not like
it's
it was
45 minutes. Yeah.
Like cross country flight or anything like that, right? But no, that was bizarre. I
just
was
bizarre. Exactly.
I was really surprised when I found out that they were actually flying the day of. And yeah, man, it was a disaster. Like it just started off and you could just tell that the Leafs were asleep.
But that's the thing. Like that's what I was getting at in the way of like, hey, so you have this thing flying the day of, okay? They're skating out in the fucking green jerseys, okay? Then you have that weird thing with Murray, and I don't think anything's even come out with regard to him being injured or what it was. And then you have the Joey Decord kid coming in, who they got to keep repeating it. He's never won a game in the NHL. He's never won a game in the NHL. He's never won a game in the NHL. So you just add up these things of the Leafs flying the day of, weird, the green jerseys, and now this Joey Decord kid playing who's never won a game in the NHL.
You can see it coming.
Oh my God, bet your fucking house on this one. And again, just because it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, like throw that one too. Like just waiting for it, right? And the slow start, like bang, bang, goal, goal. Oh, and Hutchison was in, throw that one in. But oh my God, just what is a disaster. It's not too often you watch your favorite team play and you genuinely do not enjoy watching it. I didn't enjoy watching that. Like even when they were coming back, there's like I almost like wasn't excited. I was just kind of like, nah, this is just like gross.
Just teasing us again.
Yeah, and you kind of knew it too. That like, there's no way this is gonna work out.
Lepore, you knew they were gonna mount a little bit of a comeback.
Yeah,
you knew it was gonna happen. And then the last 5-6 minutes they were gonna try their hardest and throw the kitchen sink at Ottawa. And then of course they score a couple goals, and you get your hopes up, like, oh my God, they're really gonna pull off this comeback. And then nope, they just leafed us again.
Yeah, they didn't deserve it, so whatever.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And you alluded to it, when you kind of did your rant there about the Vancouver games and how Demko was amazing, and then how Hellebuck was incredible in a couple of those games. I wasn't that upset with the way the Leafs played in most of those games. So like I mentioned,
shouldn't be.
And like I mentioned, they are now 1-5 since sweeping the Oilers. So they obliterate the Oilers. They outscore them 13-1 over 3 games. They hold McDavid and Draisaitl to 1 point in 3 games. Everyone's saying it's the greatest Leafs team of all time. I'm saying it's the best Leafs team of my lifetime. I mean, everyone is just on cloud 9 after that sweep. And even though they're 1-5 since that 3-game sweep, I actually don't think they've been that bad. Because like you talked about, Lepore, there's about 3 or 4 games of those 6 where they just flat out got goalied, where Thatcher Demko and Connor Hellebuck stood on their heads and were incredible. So the way that I look at it, as long as you're generating high quality scoring chances and you're winning puck battles and you're doing a lot of good things, both offensively and defensively, then there's not really a lot to be upset about. Yeah, can we be upset that certain players aren't finishing off plays? Yeah, that's really frustrating. And like you said, Lepore, like, sure, we can say Connor Hellebuck and Thatcher Demko were great and they won those games for the Canucks and Jets. But at the end of the day, your players, when they get high quality scoring chances like that, they got to fucking score.
Yeah, come on.
Right? So at some point, it's like you mentioned, you have to expect your best players, and not even your best players, guys like Ilya Mikheyev and Pierre Engvall, when they're getting scoring chances and they're point blank opportunities, you have to expect those guys to score. You can't just let them you can't just let them off the hook when they're letting opportunities like that go by the wayside. So that was a little bit frustrating for sure. But all in all, other than that 5-2 Jets game, and then obviously the disaster against the Senators on Sunday night in the second of a back-to-back, for the most part, I don't think that 1-5 record kind of shows how the Leafs have played over the last 6 games. And that's why I think going into this little bit of a break that they have now, that yes, they're going to be mad and they're going to be frustrated that they only won once in those 6 games, but they also have to feel good for the most part about how they've been playing. And that might sound a little crazy to some fans to say that, but they've been playing some pretty solid hockey. And listen, sometimes it's not going to go your way, right? They got off to a ridiculous start this year. Okay. They were at a 130 point pace. We knew they weren't going to keep that up. Obviously, things have come back down to earth a little bit. They weren't as good as we thought they were at the beginning of the season, but I also don't think they're nearly as bad as some people think they are based on the recent stretch of games.
You know what's actually funny, and this is going to sound weird coming off a string of games where they've lost 5 of their last 6. You always try to learn as much as you can from the games you watch of your team. And when I say that, like more in the broad scope of what this team can do, like both in the way of winning and losing, where there are stretches that really show you something, both, and that can happen both in a positive way and a negative way. I look at the recent games, and what it shows me is that if we get to the playoffs and this team doesn't come out of the division, it is because they didn't play well. And that may sound overly simplistic, but what I mean by that is it's up to them. If you watch those games against Winnipeg, they're carrying the play. Like I don't think anyone watched those 3 games and could say, "Oh, the Jets are a better team than the Leafs."
Yeah, there's no way.
There's no way. Like I mean, you could say, "Well, if Hellebuck plays amazing, okay, that you could say that about any playoff series, any season." But I look at these games against Vancouver those 2 they lost. I look at the games against the Jets, and to me, I watched the Leafs play very well and just not score. And again, and a lot of these games too, like even that one where we were saying it was truly their worst game of the year. It was a 1-goal game at one point.
Yeah, they weren't even that bad.
They were like based on like, it's not like they got blown out 6-1, like kind of like old Leafs teams when they played poorly. So I'm putting more pressure on them with my expectations, saying this is up to you now. Like you're showing that even when you lose, it's not that bad and you don't play that poorly and usually still in the game. So if you lose, it's going to be not because someone beat you. It's going to be because someone beat yourself. So, I mean, if we can be worried, that's the question as to whether we should be worried that they don't play to their potential. But I'll ask you that. Is there any part of you that has that like lingering Toronto Maple Leafs thing swinging around your head that when it comes playoff time, they won't play to their potential?
No, to be honest, I'm not worried because I've been watching this team very closely this season, game in and game out. And honestly, Lepore, for 90% of the games they've played so far, I've thought they were the better team. And maybe that's a little bit too high. But if you've truly been tracking this team all season and you've seen them play against all the other Canadian teams, you cannot sit there and tell me with a straight face that any of those teams are better than the Leafs.
Right.
There's no way in hell. And yes, can Connor Hellebuck stand on his head one game? And can Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl go nuts for a couple of games? But right now, where we are, halfway through the season at this point, I still don't think there is a single team in this Canadian division that can beat the Leafs in a 7-game playoff series when the Leafs play their best hockey. And do they have to play their absolute best hockey to beat these teams? Not really. But if the Leafs are playing to 90 to 95% of their potential in a 7-game series, I still think it's going to be very difficult for any of these teams to beat them in a 7-game playoff series.
Fully agree. Some of those numbers, like you mentioned that 4-3 loss to Winnipeg. And again, like this is one game. So people can say, oh, you're taking examples from one game. I just found this game hilarious. Some of the 5v5 shot metrics. Okay. So again, Winnipeg won 4-3. 5-on-5, the shot attempts were 53-32 Toronto. The unblocked attempts were 44-30 for Toronto. The shots on goal were 32-19 for Toronto. The scoring chance area attempts were 40-15 for Toronto. And the high danger area attempts were 16-5 Toronto. That's more than 3-1 for high danger scoring chances.
Unbelievable.
Like that's shit kicking a team, and you lost 4-3. And again, we're not completely letting them off the hook. You have to fucking score, but just pointing to certain types of losses and where you can just say, you're showing me you're a really good team. And like these are going to happen, and Leafs Nation's going to freak out. The media is going to freak out. They're going to fuel everything. But I mean, me looking at it, there are reasons why I might be. No, you know what? I take that back, because the only things that would worry me going into, say, a series with Winnipeg is Hellebuck. And no team, like, I mean, even the juggernaut Tampa Bay Lightning teams would go into any series and say, well, the goalie might stand on his head. And you get into the playoffs and you're going to play a really good goalie at some point.
Yeah, that's almost a fear with any team.
With any team. So if you're going in saying, please God, don't let their goalie play out of his mind, well, I mean, every team's going to say that, and you're in pretty good shape. So I'm in the same boat with you that I'm not absolutely worried, right? And even too, it's actually kind of funny. Like, back to people freaking out. Someone pulled this up, which I found was awesome. So of course, Leaf Nation is freaking out. The Leafs have lost 5 of their last 6 games, and the takes come out of like, we thought this team was a contender. There's no way any real contender would ever play this badly over a stretch. Oh, really? So let's go back. Let's look at the numbers, ladies and gentlemen.
Enlighten us, Michael.
Oh, man, awesome. Because, again, it's the whole thing of when bad things happen. I've brought it up before, the whole, what if this happened to the Toronto Maple Leafs? I know people would be kicking and screaming and going nuts, but when it happens to any other team, say minus the Montreal Canadiens, nobody cares or no one notices. So last year, the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup. They had a stretch where they lost 5 of 6 games, just like the Leafs. The year before, the Blues won the Stanley Cup, the 18-19 Blues. They had a stretch where they lost 5 of 6 games. Going back, the 7-18 Capitals, they had a stretch where they lost 6 of 8 games.
Whew.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm not done, Bruno. Then you go back, the 16-17 Penguins, they had one, it was a little different. They had a 4-game losing streak, okay? But now you go to the 15-16 Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins. They had a stretch where they lost 9 of 11.
Oh my goodness.
Bad. Like, again, what if this Leafs team lost 9 of 11? So again, not letting them completely off the hook. They lost games. They played really poorly in some of those games. But what, as we like to do on Gluttons For Punishment, is try our best to push forward a little perspective. And they got to turn it around. We're not denying that. They got those 2 games coming up this week against Calgary. They have a break. We expect them to play well and turn it around. And it is going to get to a point where you don't just really expect good play or hope for good play. You hope for W's, because it does get to a point where, no, we got to start getting some points, boys. But at this point, no. The Leafs are pretty well in the same boat as I had them a week ago doing this podcast.
I'm right there with you, man. And if I can pick one thing that's been frustrating and that maybe I am a little bit scared of as we, play the second half of the season and get into the playoffs, it's the goaltending, Lepore.
That's
the one thing, because when I look at this team from top to bottom, when I look at their forward group and I look at the defense core, there really isn't a lot of holes. There really isn't. You stack
and this team's going to add, Bruno. Like, we even talked about, like, this team is good. That first round draft pick is gone. This team's going to add. They have to.
This team is all in this season. All right. They have an Amazon filming crew following them around.
I keep forgetting about that.
They've already traded, first round draft picks in the past, getting Jake Muzzin. They dealt a first round pick just to get rid of friggin' Patrick Marleau. Like, Kyle Dubas is not going to be afraid to make a move here. He's going to be aggressive. And he knows that his team is really, really good and that they have a pretty damn good chance of winning the Stanley Cup. And, like I mentioned, there's really not that many holes on this roster. And I know that, some people listening to this podcast aren't following, the ins and outs of every other team in the NHL. But I promise you, you go through all those teams and their rosters and the way they've been playing this season, I would stack up the Leafs to really any of the top teams in the league. But the one area of concern I have at the moment is the goaltending, because Freddie Andersen right now, Lepore, is having the worst season of his career.
Oh.
Last year wasn't good. Last year was his worst season as a Leaf over his first 4 years. So he's been essentially getting progressively worse as the years go on with the Leafs. Yeah. And now this is officially right now his worst statistical season, not only of his Leafs tenure, but of his entire career in the NHL. So just kind of looking at his stats, He's now 13-7-2. I mean, throw the record out the window, whatever. This team is really good. But he has a 900 save percentage and a 2.86 goals against average. And if you look at just the last 5 games, like I mentioned earlier in the show, last 5 games, Andersen has allowed 18 goals. He's 1-4-0 with an 872 save percentage.
Gross.
And Jack Campbell is having injury problems right now. And when Jack Campbell's been in, he's been great. But Jack Campbell can't stay healthy. So that's also a concern. And then a massive concern is if this team has to play Michael Hutchinson in the playoffs, they're in deep.
We're done. We're done here. Yeah, I mean,
like so. When I just look at their goaltending as a whole, like I would not be surprised one bit, Lepore, if we get to playoff time and Campbell and Andersen are both healthy, and if Campbell's playing better, I would not be surprised one bit if they just roll with Campbell in the playoffs. And that might be a hot take. You could say I'm crazy, but the way that Andersen's been trending, not only recently, but even over the last couple of seasons, it's concerning. So what's your take on the goaltending situation right now, Lepore, and the play of Freddie Andersen?
The thing with Freddie, it's like you said, his save percentage is 900. It's not that you watch him. Like, I can't really think of many goals this year where I kind of got out of my chair and yelled, like, what the fuck, Freddie? Like, how'd you not save that? It's just that cliche thing of just make a save. And that's why he's at 900. And I think that's why a lot of Leafs fans are frustrated. And especially, again, when you're watching the goalie across the way stand on his friggin' head and make 40 saves against us and we lose. But it's that. It's just that thing of like, Freddie, like, make a save. And he's costing himself money, like, as we're moving forward. Like you said, the numbers have been trending down every single year. So, I mean, he's got to snap out of it even for himself. But it's not good. And as for Campbell, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns there. Like, ideally, we want Freddie to be at his best come playoff time, and he's the guy in. We don't want to be putting our hopes on a backup goalie who, like you said, gets hurt all the time. But as for Freddie goes, like, we've seen enough now, So, like, I'm at that point. Like, I was kind of brushed it aside in the way that, I guess I was using like confirmation bias for what he had done previously. But it seems like I have a good enough sample size of data that shows that he's just average or even like average at best. And that's not going to cut it. It's kind of like what we said before in the way that, and funny how I just said how he's like average, but the whole take we had as the season started was we need our D to be fine. And it's been better than fine. And now we have the situation with our goaltending where the mindset is just don't lose it for us. And, make that occasional save. I don't think that's too much to ask from a starting goalie making $5 million a year.
Yeah, just make the save
in
those big moments when the team needs it and the game is, maybe on the verge of slipping away. Just give us one big save. That's all we're asking for.
And the Leafs are at a point as a team where, I mean, it's maybe like the conference finals or the Stanley Cup finals where like, goalie's going to have to steal a game or two, but there aren't going to be too many of those games throughout the course of a regular season where we're going to say, okay, maybe Freddie stole that one or we're going to need Freddie to steal that one. So am I worried? Like that's a strong word, but it doesn't take much. Like in the playoffs, all it takes is one bad game or one bad goal for that matter. And I'm pissed off and our goalie blew it for us. But you really think there's a chance like we get to a point and Campbell could be the starting goalie? I mean, at the end of the day, I guess Freddie's done after this. We don't owe anything to him. So, and now's not the time to be nice or to show respect to the goalie.
Bit, man. I don't doubt it for one bit. He's in the final year of his contract. And like you said, he's not going to make a lot of money in free agency if he continues to play like this.
Yeah.
And I would be absolutely stunned if the Leafs bring him back because
that we're done. No.
Because
to me, that's
one,
craziness.
They're just not going to be able to afford him. Even if he is losing money with the way that he's playing, he's still going to get, sort of a sizable contract, right?
There's always one stupid team.
Exactly.
People always break it down like, oh, he doesn't deserve it. I'm like, it only takes one dumb team to do it, and he's going to get it.
And that's the thing, right? We don't owe him anything anymore. We've seen everything when it comes to Freddie Andersen. We've seen him at his absolute best, and we've seen him at his absolute worst. And right now, I mean, you ask any Leaf fan, they do not have a lot of confidence in this guy.
Yeah.
And you can look at the stats, you can watch the games and just see the lack of big saves in those big moments, like we just alluded to. And I think come playoff time, it's going to be a situation, whichever goalie is playing the best is going to play. And yes, will they give Freddie Andersen the benefit of the doubt and give him more of an opportunity? Of course, because he's the starting goalie. And, you know, they've gone through the last 4+ years with the guy. But it's gotten to the point now where there's no more fucking around.
Yeah.
There's no more, oh, it's all right, we're going to get them next year. Or it's okay, we'll just get them in the next game. No, this team is built to win a Stanley Cup right now.
And the whole thing with the division thing, and like I alluded to, how I expect them to go nuts at the deadline. It's like it's a different type of year, and let's face it, there's no Boston, there's no Tampa in our division. And like how we said, if this team does not make the semifinals, it's on them. It's because they didn't play their best. So there's no dancing around what the thing is to do. No, we're being very direct here. We're not fucking around, for lack of better terminology. So if there's any year where they're going to disrespect someone to do what's better for the team, it's going to be this year.
Yeah, this isn't an up and coming team that is, you know, working to become a great team and one day, you know, become a contender. No, wake up, everybody. This team is a contender right now. There's no more, we're that cute up and coming team. And like I said, we're just going to get them next year. Don't worry. Pat on the back, everybody. Job well done. There's no more of that shit. And that's why I think tough decisions are going to have to be made. And I have full confidence that Sheldon Keefe is ready to make those tough decisions alongside Kyle Dubas. So, Lepore, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all transpires as we get closer and closer to playoff time. But another thing that I wanted to ask you is about the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah.
So, obviously, a huge 3-game series for them as they continue to creep closer and closer to the Leafs for first place in the North Division. What are your thoughts on this team? Like, do you actually think that they can win the Canadian division? And do you think they can beat the Leafs in a playoff series?
I think it's between, I would be absolutely shocked, like flabbergasted, if the team to come out of the Canadian division was not the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Winnipeg Jets, just because they're the best built. Like, let's face it. The Jets are one of those teams, and like we've complimented the Jets a lot on this show, and like us just saying now that, like, you know, we would expect the Leafs are kind of tell ourselves that the Leafs should beat them, but that doesn't mean that we also don't think that Winnipeg is a very good team themselves. They're a nice team, and it's kind of weird in the way that they're very likable. Like, people always have the thing about like personalities on a team. And again, we don't know these guys on a personal level, but it seems like they're just a very likable team. They're a good group. I mean, most people like Paul Maurice. We've talked about Hellebuck, so they have the goaltending. They play smart. Like, they're a smart, functional team. They're a balanced team. Can they win the Canadian division? Yes. To be honest, I mean, if you asked me that about any other team, I think I would say no. Like, I think it's that straightforward. I would say, can Toronto win? Yes. Can the Jets win? Yes. Every other team, I'd say no. Because even if the way it's going to be set up, where we expect the Leafs and Jets to finish 1-2, I would say no one's going to beat both of them. Like, I'd be like, people could say, well, maybe if McDavid and Draisaitl play out of their mind, but even then, like, that would be something historic. So, like, to answer the question of, can the Jets win the division? Absolutely. And over a 7-game series with the Leafs, I'd give the edge to the Leafs, but we just finished talking about how Connor Hellebuck's ridiculous and they have a lot of game breakers. So as much as a team can beat the Leafs, I would say the Jets have a chance to beat them. I mean, again, I wouldn't bet on it, but can they beat them? Absolutely.
Yeah, I like this Jets team. And you know what? The thing that impressed me the most watching these 3 games against Winnipeg was the play of that Ehlers, Kyle Connor, and Dubois line,
Oh my God.
which I thought was easily their best line, because we all
So
know that
good.
Mark Scheifele leads the team in scoring and Blake Wheeler's having another solid season. But that first line, with Scheifele, Wheeler, and Stastny, honestly did not really generate a hell of a lot of offense against the Leafs.
Yeah.
Like they were
that Stastny tip was crazy though, when he was like, it was going
in the last game, those guys, kind of finally woke up, and Scheifele scored that, garbage time power play goal at the end of the game. But for the most part, the line that I was really, concerned about when they were out there, and you can just see based on the eye test, like, man, these guys are buzzing around. They're creating chances. It was Ehlers, Connor, and Dubois.
Yeah.
So, when you look at that Jets top six, it's potent. They could score with any team in the league. And obviously we've talked a lot about Connor Hellebuck. I do think the Jets have some holes on defense. And I think for the most part, the Leafs, sort of expose them and prove that they can pretty much do whatever they want, in a couple of those games against Winnipeg. Obviously that Hellebuck had to be superhuman in. But, going back to, can Winnipeg win the division? One thing I've, been thinking about recently, Lepore, is, does it even matter who wins this division? Like, if you're the Leafs or the Jets, do you even care?
Oh, you mean the regular season?
Yeah, the regular season.
Yeah.
Like, do you even care at this point if you finish first or second? There's no home ice advantage.
Yeah,
right?
I thought about that.
There's no fans in the stands. Like, sure, of course, the Leafs want to win the division. I still think they're going to win the Canadian division. And yes, I think they're going to be disappointed if they don't win the Canadian division. But I think when you kind of step back and you look at the big picture, if they finish second and the Jets win the division by 2 or 3 points, is it really going to matter? Because at the end of the day, if they're the two best teams, they're still going to meet in the conference finals, and there's not going to be home ice advantage. And sure, you're going to be in your own rink for 4 out of the 7 games, but we all know with no fans right now, it's irrelevant. So that's kind of the way I look at it as well, is like, honestly, I don't really think it matters in the grand scheme of things. Maybe the fans are, getting a little bit more excited and fired up about it than the actual players are.
I've thought about that. I've thought about even like across the league, because it's getting to a point where, I mean, kind of like the old setup with the divisions. Like, people used to joke that like teams by Christmas were done, because if you were last place, and then flip it around, if you were at the top, if you were the Oilers, you were comfortable.
Statistically, you didn't have enough time to make up ground, and vice versa.
So like, I've wondered that, like, across the league, are you going to have teams, or have you already had teams that are kind of, I don't want to say checked out, but yeah, like players can get kind of bored and whatever. Like, we're locked in, there's no urgency. And also in the way of, and things we don't really see as fans, in the way of like coaching strategies and even how the management plays and dresses guys, do they just not care? Because now I'm going to get ahead of myself here, but even as far as like, okay, we know you have the 4 teams who win the division. I would be absolutely shocked if it's on a bubble at that point. Like, I don't think they're going to have like, and who knows where we're at, like politically by playoff time, but to have teams like flying back and forth. And even if you are, say, like the Leafs or the Jets, are you okay with that? Like, going across the border and coming back, and then even with rules in certain states, how they are allowing fans. Well, if I'm the Toronto Maple Leafs, or I'm the Winnipeg Jets, or the Edmonton Oilers, I've been playing under these restrictions all season. I'm not flying into whatever state and playing in a stadium with 10,000 people. And then there's also the matter of that being an unfair advantage for one team to have fans, the other team to not. So I think the NHL might step in there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like what I expect anyway would be, okay, you have, and even who knows, maybe the divisions will end up being bubbles. But I mean, I don't think that'll happen, because it seems like pretty comfortable now. But anyways, so let's say, okay, you have a regular playoff for the first 2 rounds. I think you'd have a 4-team bubble. Is what I would predict, because even on the team side, to like avoid the travel, stay safe. We've had COVID positives across the board. Like, even just those things of like, there was the scare with Fleury. It came back a false positive. But can you imagine, like, you're in the Stanley Cup final, or you're in the semifinal, and your starting goalie has COVID?
Yeah,
like, you just want to
colossal disaster.
Yeah, like you just want to scrap that. So to your point of like, do the players care? Do the teams care where they finish? I don't think they do. And to be honest, like these conversations happen well in advance. The management and ownership groups probably already know. That decision's probably already been made by the NHL of like, or at least like they're 90% there of what it's going to be once the semifinals happen. So like to your point, like I don't really think teams really care where they end up as long as they're in. Like let's face it.
Yeah, it almost kind of reminds me of the NBA. And I kind of, it always brings me back to LeBron James, how it never really matters where his team finishes in the regular season.
It's always amazing when people are chirping him during the regular season. Like, have you not learned that he doesn't care?
Yeah, like
right
he
now?
doesn't give a shit
oh my god,
about where his team finishes in the conference, whether it's second, third, fourth, first.
Yeah.
They just get into this mode come playoff time. Look at any of the teams he's played on, whether it's Cleveland, Miami, the Lakers, obviously. And I think I'm kind of getting similar vibes right now in the NHL. And you made a really good point about kind of growing tired of playing the same teams.
Definitely, man.
And over.
Definitely.
Like this. And I know I don't want to give excuses and, for how the Leafs, the Leafs obviously were pretty bad this past week. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for them, but you can kind of see just some fatigue setting in, especially towards the end of the week when they faced Ottawa. Second night of a back-to-back, their third string goalies in net. They fly to Ottawa the day of the game. They're probably like, you know what? Let's just get this shit over with.
Exactly. And they know they're looking forward to the week off. They're just like it's not an excuse. It's bullshit. Get the 2 points, but you can see it happening 100%. Yeah.
And Lepore, that's actually a great segue into the next conversation I want to have about the Ottawa Senators. So recently, this created quite the stir on social media, okay? Former Senators defenseman Marc Methot took to Twitter and said, Ottawa will have a much better team than Toronto in 2 to 3 years, won't even be close. And Leafs Nation lost their shit.
Awesome.
And personally, I'll throw it to you first before I elaborate on my thoughts.
Okay.
Personally, I think Marc Methot is nuts.
Wow. Okay.
With this statement, and I'll explain a little bit later. But first, Lepore, I want to throw it over to you and get your thoughts on this tweet from Marc Methot.
Okay. So I like Marc Methot. I like Marc Methot a lot. And I actually loved him as a player. Like I obviously go to a lot of Sens games being in Ottawa. I loved him as a player. He was actually always the guy, like when the Leafs D was absolute trash all the time. He was always the guy that I was like, fuck, the Leafs need 2 Marc Methots. Just in the way that he was just so fundamentally good and like the perfect partner to put with Karlsson, a really good player in the way that you would never lose because of Marc Methot. And with the Leafs firepower, those are the types of guys they needed.
Yeah, just a solid, steady defenseman.
Oh, so good. I remember even too, like his name would bounce around whenever they do like those projected Canada lineups. And to me, people like, what? Marc Methot? I'd be like, no, that makes perfect sense because you just need your D to be fine and not fuck it up and blow it against Russia. And that's exactly what Marc Methot will provide. But to his comments about the Leafs in the Sens, I think Marc Methot is a very smart guy, or the person influencing his social media decisions is a very smart person. I don't think it's a coincidence that Marc Methot has eased his way onto Ottawa Sports Radio recently. He now has a podcast with Brent Wallace. So how do you make a splash? How do you get clicks? How do you get people yelling? You talk about the biggest fan base and you poke at them. And that's exactly what Marc Methot did. And in saying that, I'm not completely eliminating the possibility of what he said. I just think the whole thing doesn't make sense in the way that to say any team who's dead last, let's face it, dead last in the league in any year, and then point to a team who's near the top of the standings and say, oh, in 2 or 3 years, they'll be better than them and it won't be close. So even the added, it won't be close. Like that was the perfect Twitter thing of like
extra twist.
Yeah, like like if he would have said
of Leaf fans.
Yeah, if he would have said, oh, in 2-3 years, the Ottawa Senators will be better than the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's like, okay, like they have a lot of young players. They have They're going to pick high again. They have a lot of star power among those young players. Like we love Stützle, we love Tkachuk. We've talked about Thomas Chabot, but that extra little thing of like, it won't be close. So that push of the Sens are going to be incredible and the Leafs are going to be bad. And bravo, Marc Methot. Bravo, Marc Methot. But to the actual point, if we're going to talk about the question, the current Ottawa Senators team, like we said, we do like that team. DJ Smith, we think, is a good coach. So I'm going to go through a list because I don't think this is getting enough attention with regard to the Ottawa Senators because everyone's talking about their kids. Obviously, Batherson, another good one, scored 2 goals against Toronto. They have those kids in North Dakota. That Sanderson defenseman looks amazing. Again, they're going to pick high again. So something to be fearful for if you're a team in their division. But
sickos are fired up about that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but from a management standpoint, so I'm going to run through some of their current contracts because I think because of all the hype of these young kids and all their cap space, no one really talks about their current cap space or current cap situation and some of the moves Dorion has done. So if I asked you, Bruno, Dadonov, if I said, okay, Dadonov is a free agent this summer, he wants a 2-year deal at $5 million a year. He's got 11 points in 31 games played this year. Would you want the Leafs to sign him?
Absolutely not.
Okay, moving on. Colin White. White and a lot of people in Ottawa who are not Senators fan, it's like an ongoing joke because Pierre Maguire and I think some of the other guys on 1200 here, after Colin White's excellent performance at the World Juniors, his comparable, and you love when they do this with the draft.
Love is the best with Pierre Maguire.
Are you ready for this one? Patrice Bergeron with better offensive ability.
No,
that was the quote on Colin White. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
If Colin White was a free agent this summer and he wanted 4 years at $4.75 million a year, would you give it to him?
Hell no.
Moving on, Connor Brown. If he wanted 2 years at $3.6 million a year, would you give it to him?
Absolutely not.
It's getting better. Nikita Zaitsev. If he wanted 3 years at $4.5 million a year, hello, Leafs fans, would you want to sign him?
No.
And the last one, Murray in nets. 3 years left on his deal after this at $6.25 million a year. Would you want Murray to be the goalie?
Here's what I'll say about Murray. I was actually really optimistic about how he could turn his career around. Obviously,
me too.
He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's still young. He's still relatively young. I think he's young. 27, 26, 27.
He might not even be that old. It's because he got in right away. You think he's older than he is, but yeah, he's younger than we all think he is.
But man, oh man, Lepore, the way he's been playing, I got to say no to that as well.
Exactly. So to Marc Methot's point of in 2 to 3 years, the Ottawa Senators will be better than the Toronto Maple Leafs and it won't be close. Well, I mean, people can get traded, things can happen, but in that 2-3 years from now, Dadonov, White, Brown, Zaitsev, and Murray will all be on the Ottawa Senators, and that's $24.1 million on the cap.
That's not good.
That's not good. And there's been among Sens fans, like of course being in Ottawa, I have a lot of like friends who are Sens fans. The thing they've often said about Pierre Dorion is that he's an amazing scout, but a terrible general manager. Like he has the eye for talent, but when it just comes to contract time, he just gives these like average guys like way too much money. Like Zach Smith was one, and then like weird decisions in the way that it was speaking of Marc Methot. The Sens lost Marc Methot in the expansion draft to Vegas because they protected Zach Smith.
Yeah, it's like why?
Why? Like I remember he got that deal, and then there's a whole issue with Dion. Now we're getting deep into it. There's a whole issue with Dion Phaneuf that they could have exposed Phaneuf if Phaneuf gave them permission because they knew Phaneuf wouldn't be taken, so it would have been a smart move by the Sens. But then Phaneuf refused because I guess that one chance in his mind of like going to a place he didn't want to go. So then they protected Smith instead of Methot. And then obviously Methot got taken. So in retrospect, that was a terrible decision. But anyways, again, bravo to Marc Methot for stirring the pot. It's always fun. You try your best to avoid Twitter comments to keep your mental health as best as it can be. But bravo to him. He's making a name for himself. Like I said, local radio. He's got the podcast. He's a good storyteller, man. I've heard him on the radio. He tells some great stories. But like I said, Good on him, man. You want to get some attention, poke Leafs fans. And here we are in our podcast talking about it. So there you go, Mark. If you want to come on the show, Mark, we'd love to have you. It'd be great.
Absolutely. Come join us, Marc Methot. I would love to have a little conversation with you, because here's my take on this whole situation.
Here we go. Hurry hard.
And I totally understand what he's doing. Okay. That's the content game. How can we fire up fans? How can we get more engagement? How can we poke the bear? Give me all that clickbait, right? That's what content is all about.
We know nothing about that, right, Bruno?
Yeah, I don't know anything about the content.
It's not going well, by the way. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, when I look at this tweet, okay, let's just break this down. So in 2 to 3 years, he thinks the Senators are going to be better than the Leafs. And let me just completely ignore the whole, it won't even be close. I'm going to completely ignore that. One thing I need to say to Senators fans and other teams that are going through a rebuild, not all rebuilds are created equal.
Hilarious. The teams going through rebuilds is hilarious.
I cannot understand how fans of certain teams think that just because their team sucks right now and they're gathering all these prospects and these draft picks, that it automatically means that, you know, in 2, 3, 4 years, they're going to be a contender.
Hashtag Buffalo Sabres.
Hashtag Buffalo Sabres. Hashtag Edmonton Oilers, who have the best player on the planet and Leon Draisaitl and still can't figure it out. Yeah. So when I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, okay, so in 2016, 2017, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Hyman, all rookies. There were more rookies on that team. Connor Brown.
Zaitsev went forever.
Zaitsev was also a rookie that season.
Didn't they break a record? I think that it was like a record for an opening night lineup. I think like 11 rookies or something. Oh, yeah, I might be wrong. It was something crazy. Yeah.
But that rookie class came in and immediately made an impact. Now, did they have a better supporting cast than the Senators currently do? Yes, they did, because there was guys like Nazem Kadri and Jake Gardiner, and obviously Morgan Riley was there, right?
Yeah.
So there were
Tyler
already
Bozak, James Van Riemsdyk.
Exactly. Yeah. There were already some solid complementary pieces. But the thing with that Leafs rookie class is that they were just really, really good.
They were too good. They were too good. It fucked us contract-wise because they got too good too fast.
Exactly. And you look at Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander. I'm not even going to include Zach Hyman, but to have 3 rookies who are that good, and to this day, 2 of them are considered at this point. Matthews, I would consider a top 5 player in the world. You could make a case that Marner is a top 10 to 15 player. I mean, you could say maybe he's a little bit worse than that. Nylander, we're not going to put in that tier yet. Sure. But these are 3 really, really good players. And when I look at the Ottawa Senators, I don't want to hear it, because Thomas Chabot is in year 4. Brady Tkachuk is in year 3. And Tim Stützle, obviously now in his rookie season, he's the one player on that team who I think has legitimate superstar potential. Now, I really like Thomas Chabot. I think he's a really good player, but just specifically looking at their forward group, he is the one player who I think is going to be a superstar. So this is the first year that, let's call it, the 3 cornerstone players that they have played together. And Lepore, they're one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League. Like I said, year 4 of Chabot, year 3 of Tkachuk, and Stützle joins them now for the first time, and they're terrible. So don't tell me that in 2 to 3 years, just because they're going to get another high draft pick this year, and they drafted defenseman Jake Sanderson, and they have these other young guys coming up. I could give you a laundry list of Leafs prospects over the years that Leaf fans thought were going to be really good, and to this day, or in this moment, we're going to be key contributors on this Leafs team, and they have either been traded or they just sucked and didn't pan out.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. Remember that guy? There's a lot of those.
Remember when everyone thought Jeremy Bracco?
I was gonna say, oh, he's the next Marner. Like, I remember hearing we got Marner 2.0.
Don't tell me Senators fans talking about Shane Pinto, I believe his name is. I think they drafted him in the 2nd round, and some of the other prospects they have. Don't talk as if these guys are going to be stars in the league and, you know, go-to key contributors for your team in the next 2 to 3 years. And then another thing that I look at, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander are all under contract until at least 2023, 2024. So what makes any Senators fan think that the Senators in that time span are going to surpass the Leafs?
I think what happens, and this is talking about all fan bases, like we just made fun of ourselves. First of all, what is amazing about this conversation is that the Sens beat the Leafs, embarrassed them pretty bad. Bravo, Sens. You guys played awesome. And we love the Ottawa Senators on Gluttons For Podcast. We're just talking about Marc Methot right now. So I think what fans, and this is like a broad hockey topic, and it happens every World Juniors. It happens every time you list prospects. The first one is age. So they'll talk about a kid, anyone, any fan base, anyone in the media will talk about a kid who's, say, playing major junior, and he's 19 years old. He's already been drafted. He was a first-round pick, and, he's ripping it up. And I always step back, and I'm like, well, if he's a 19-year-old, and he's a first-round draft pick, and he's playing against other kids who are his age and younger, I expect him to rip it up. So there's that element of it. Or let's say the kid who's playing college hockey, and they're like, oh, he's, going to win the Hobey Baker. So-and-so has got this many goals. I'm like, well, it happens in college where the prospect's like 20. It's like, well, if he's 20, there's 20-year-olds in the NHL.
Didn't Jimmy Vesey win the Hobey Baker?
Jimmy Vesey won the Hobey. So everyone getting excited about one of their prospects being nominated for the Hobey Baker. Jimmy Vesey won the Hobey Baker.
Congratulations.
So it's that idea of like, well, there's 20-year-olds in the NHL, even an average 20-year-old in the National Hockey League. If you put them in NCAA hockey, they would dominate. Absolutely dominate. And I think that always gets mistaken, or they'll compare numbers, and not to bring it to the Leafs, but say like Marner, for example. Marner had that crazy season with London where he won everything as an 18-year-old. So he still had one more to go. Like his first year with the Leafs, he still could have been playing junior hockey, put up like 60-something points. Imagine he would have been playing for the London Knights, or you insert that kid in the World Juniors, like he would have been a cheat code. So I think that's a common mistake that people make when evaluating prospects. They look at these dominant numbers and they don't look at their age, or they don't really use the perspective of like the expectation based on that player. Like, and again, like I'm complimenting a player saying, okay, let's say a defenseman is picked in the top 10 in the draft. And then let's say he's playing in junior hockey or NCAA hockey. Oh, he's dominating and they're all excited. It's like, well, he was picked in the top 10. Your expectation is him to dominate. It's obviously a good thing that he's thank God he's dominating. You should be scared if he's not dominating playing with kids. But
when you're picking him that high in the draft,
that's my point.
Immediate contributor, a potential elite player for your team. He better be dominating at those levels of hockey. Yeah,
he's playing against players who will never get a sniff at pro hockey. Like he should dominate. And again, it's I'm complimenting the player, but I'm just saying that's where the expectation lies. And again, it happens always in the World Juniors. Like some kid, these players who play for Canada, rip it up. Again, a lot of the time they're 19. When they're 18 and dominating, that's something. Or even sometimes younger. I always laugh, Crosby. So Crosby made it, and then we're going completely off the rails here, but it's, good conversations and perspective. Crosby was 16 when he made the World Junior team the first time, then made it again at 17, obviously. At 18, he was in the NHL, so he didn't play. And then at 19, he won the Hart Trophy. So he could have still been playing junior hockey the year he won the Hart Trophy.
Imagine what he
and again,
done.
I'm not saying anyone is comparing their prospects to Sidney Crosby, but I was trying to tell people to try to focus on that, like where they are compared to their peers and where they were selected and where your expectations should lie based on where they were selected. Because let's face it, if you're drafted into the NHL, especially in the first round, it's because you're elite. So in that lower level, you're going to be elite. And that's not saying, none of these kids for the Senators are going to make it or for any team we'd be talking about. I just find it's hilarious when people talk about prospects and like so-and-so's dominating this, so-and-so's dominating that. They should be dominating if they're even going to be a bad NHL player. That's it.
Yeah, and fans just naturally get more excited about their own prospects and all their draft picks than they probably should. And just another thing to kind of tie it all up, which I kind of forgot to mention with the Leafs, is that year that all of those rookies came in, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Hyman, go down the list. They took the Washington Capitals to 6 games in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, making the playoffs.
So it's not like there was this slow, let's ease our way into the NHL. Matthews scored 40 friggin' goals, and this team almost beat the Washington Capitals in the playoffs. Yeah. So to tell me that this Senators team with like I mentioned, Shabbat in year 4, Kachuk in year 3, Stützle now on board, where they're still a bottom feeder in the NHL. I'm just tempering expectations a little bit for Senators fans. Yes. Do we really like some of the prospects that you guys have on your roster? Absolutely. I love Tim Stützle. I'm ready to go get a Tim Stützle jersey.
Awesome
that backhand pass he made on the power play to Drake Batherson, disgusting.
Worst fucking tape job in the league, but I love that kid.
Oh yeah. Oh, that tape job is something else, eh?
Anyways, yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, I think fans just really, really need to temper their expectations when their team is still rebuilding and there's still a lot of variables at play and they haven't proven that they can even make the playoffs at this point.
Yeah.
But
to sum it all up, I mean, again, Marc Methot knew exactly what he was doing, but any argument in favor of what he said is a what if. That's what I would respond. That's what I would respond with. Anything you say is a this may be that, this may be that, this may be that. Well, then if that's your argument, sorry, you lost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Lepore. Well, before we wrap this thing up, let's talk about the Leafs' upcoming schedule. Because they got
sorts.
Because they got a lot of time off. They got
a lot of thinking to do during this time off.
They played 2 games this week, 2 games the following week. So this week on the schedule, Friday and Saturday night, they have Daryl Sutter and the Calgary Flames. So
here they come.
So what are you hoping that the Leafs, I guess, address during this well-needed time off? And what do you expect to see when they take on the Calgary Flames?
I mean, you hope and expect that they'll take this time to kind of reflect at what's happened during the season so far and really look at this past week because, again, we hate to sound cliche on this podcast, but hopefully it was a little bit of a slap in the face that you need once in a while when you are a good team to kind of remind yourself that, you know, people can beat you and you're not as good as everyone says you are sometimes. So I really hope they take some time to reflect. They got nothing else to do, and the coaching staff's got nothing else to do. So, and again, they're at home for those 2 games against the Flames too, right? So they're not going anywhere. They're just chilling, waiting to play. So what else can you say other than you expect them to come out guns a-blazing and try to allow Leafs fans to forget about this like negative blip they've had in the schedule?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you just got to reset. The Leafs have 26 games left on the schedule. They've pretty much played the most games really of any team in the league. They've played 30, and I believe, I'm just looking at it right now, the Canucks and Senators have played 31. So
yeah, I noticed that.
So the Leafs have played a lot of hockey here. You know, like we alluded to earlier in the podcast, not making excuses for them, but you could see that it's just kind of got into a point in the season where maybe they've taken their foot off the gas a little bit. The intensity wasn't there last week, especially towards the end of the week, you know, obviously in that loss to the Ottawa Senators. So they got some time off now, regroup, you know, figure out how you're going to attack this moving forward. And maybe they go after somebody, Lepore. Maybe that's another thing we should talk about real quick is, do you expect this team to make a move before the trade deadline? I mean, this would be a really good time to make a move considering all the time off they have. And if someone has to come over from an American team, they can quarantine. Would you like to see them add a forward or a defenseman? What are your thoughts on that real quick?
Oh, Bruno, I fully expect this team to add. It's like what we talked on before of this year as an opportunity. I fully expect at least that first round pick to be gone. And even like looking down the prospect list of like certain names, like, I don't know, man. I think we might be shocked to see someone go that we're not maybe fully ready for, but it's a rare opportunity in the way that where this team's at right now and the structure of the playoffs. And they're looking in the mirror and saying, this is who we are and this is our opportunity. So I said, they can't fuck around. So like I want and expect them to do something. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen right now, like during this stretch where they're not playing too often. But again, like you said, it makes sense because the whole quarantine thing. So we may see it. We may wake up tomorrow and there's a trade and then that player can, you know, do his thing and come into the lineup.
Yeah, I
But
think
I mean,
anything's in play at this point because, like you mentioned, like we could trade a first round pick, and even I saw an article on Sportsnet.ca. I believe it was from Luke Fox, who even brought up the idea that the Leafs could trade Rodion Amirov, who they just picked
oh,
in the first round this past season.
fully in play, 100%.
And if they can add, a quality defenseman or a top six forward, they might have to part with a guy like that. And I know Leafs fans got really excited when, they took Rodion Amirov last year and they saw him play at the World Juniors for Russia. And he looks like he's a really good, skilled forward. But that's someone who could certainly be in play if they want to upgrade this team. Because like we've said, it's now or never. Now, is this the last year that the team's going to be blown up? No, but
according to Marc Methot, we only got 2-3 years, and then it's all shutting down. So,
but based on
we really want you on this show, Marc. Come on,
Marc, you got to come on. You really got to come on. But no, based on the way this year is set up, and we've talked about this on previous shows, with the Canadian division being the first 2 rounds of the playoffs before you get to the Final Four, there might not be a better chance for the Leafs to get to a Stanley Cup final in, let's call it, the Matthews and Marner era than right now.
Yeah, no, this is it. It's not that this is it in the way that it's now or never, but this is the best chance on paper. Like this will be it in the way of like the carpets rolled out. I'll ask you this one though, because this name popped in my head, and Leafs fans may not want to hear me say this. Would you consider letting go of Timothy Liljegren?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Rasmus Sandin is the player you got to hold on to. And, who knows? Maybe within the next couple days, both of them are going to get traded. You never know, right? But I think that Sandin at this point has, I think, pretty much solidified the fact that he's going to be a better player than Timothy Liljegren. And I know that they were both first round picks. And, I remember when Liljegren was coming out, I believe he had mono and he was supposed to get picked higher in the draft. And
Bruno, they had him at first overall. They had Liljegren at first overall the year before his draft, and then the whole mono thing and all that.
Yeah, slipped down the draft board. These smart and savvy Leafs, swooped in and stole him, mid to late first round. But at this point, I mean, based on what I've seen from Sandin, I would be upset if they let him go. But with Liljegren, I don't think I feel the same at this point.
Yeah. No, I agree. What about Robertson? That'd be madness.
That's another good one. Lepore, just like
I know, but Robertson. Now we're getting into things like I want something crazy, but like that, I want. But
that's
crazy
in play. That's in play, and you know what? I think Leaf fans have to recognize that, because based on where this team is at right now, and listen, I think especially this offseason, they really placed an importance on like good veteran, solid leadership. Guys like Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton. And listen, these guys aren't going to go out there and win you a Stanley Cup.
Well, Spezza might.
Only going to go. What's that?
Spezza might.
Oh yeah, Jason Spezza might. He's probably the best player in the world right now.
Oh yeah, he's the Hart Trophy winner, Jason Spezza.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's like, so they've clearly placed, an importance on having guys like this in the lineup, right? Where it's like I said, those guys aren't going to move the needle necessarily, but maybe they go out and try to get another experienced, grizzled vet. And I'm not saying they're going to go out and get some 40-year-old guy, right? But
people keep bringing up Stahl, and I'm like, they're not going to do that.
But maybe they trade a Robertson or a Liljegren or a Rodion Amirov or a Rasmus Sandin. You never know. They really could part with any of these guys.
You're making me sweat, Bruno.
If there's someone that they're really targeting and that Dubas really wants, and he feels like this is the year to do it, then Lepore, honestly, man, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he pulls the trigger on a deal involving any of those players.
Yeah.
But
it's going to be fun.
It's going to be really fun, man. Any last thoughts you want to get in here before I wrap this thing up?
I don't know, man. You kind of freak me out with all this trade talk. I'm having a hard time sleeping tonight going through all these trade situations in my head, and these kids, these prospects that I like put so highly, as all fans do, right? You don't want to let go of them. But no, just, you know what? Happy to slam the door on this week. Hopefully we never have to talk about these last few games ever again, and we can laugh at it later on when the Leafs are just dominating, as they should be.
Well said, Lepore. And I've mentioned this on a previous podcast. Listen, Leafs Nation, I know it was a bad week. I know you're pissed off. I know you're frustrated. I know you want so-and-so traded, and I know you're just really, really disappointed right now. But this team still leads the Canadian division. They're still one of the top teams in the NHL. They're one of the top teams in goal differential and points percentage. This team is still really good, and they're going through a tough stretch right now, but I think everything's going to be just fine. So once again, let's just all relax and enjoy the ride. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of the Gluttons for Punishment Podcast, or GFP. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube. If you listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts, we would really, really appreciate it if you go on there, you subscribe to the show, and if you enjoy the show, why don't you just go ahead and give us a 5-star rating and review? And then, of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, it would be awesome if you hammered that like button and subscribe to the channel. And then while you're at it, ring that bell as well so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone.